if you're doing some stupid little exercise or you're trying to optimize for the moment, you can be as mean or as big a liar as you want. But the venture business, entrepreneurship, and business in general is a long-term business.
Yep.
And if you wanna be successful, then you should not. You should be a good guy, a good gal, a person who pays it forward, because in the end, that will be the more successful strategy. So I wrote this.
Disclaimer number 1, guests and hosts drink on this show, and we ask that if you join us, you be of legal age and you drink responsibly. Number 2, if you want to know about check size, stage, similar questions, this is the wrong podcast for you. On Drinks with a VC, we're all about digging a little bit deeper and getting to know the person behind the investment decisions.
Hello and welcome to Drinks with a VC. Thanks for tuning in via whatever platform you are using. I am Vikram Lakwara, the co-founder and managing director of seed fund GreenCow Venture Capital. And I am joined, as always, by my co-hostess with the mostest, Bree Hansen, who leads up biz dev for Burkland, a wonderful firm that provides CFO services for technology startups. Bree, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm going to see Hamilton tomorrow night, one of my favorite musicals. And as some of our audience members may remember from our Brandon Farwell episode, huge fan of musicals here.
Yeah, and it is like a Where's Waldo book here. Bree, where are you joining us from on this episode?
I'm in Santa Monica. I'm helping build the LA market. I actually have breakfast with Rick Smith, one of our past guests, tomorrow, and I'm hopefully going to meet his puppy Hank.
Yes, that is exactly 2 callbacks back to back. Good job, Bree.
Yeah, well, we have a lot to cover with our very special guest today, so let's get right to the introduction.
Yes, let's. Well, look, if you have had anything to do with the startup ecosystem in the US for the last few decades, the chances are that you've run into our next investor in his hallmark pattern button-down shirt and horn-rimmed glasses. Just as synonymous with these fashion trends, he's actually known for being one of the most prolific investors over the last 2 decades as well, while at August Capital. His investments include enterprise software and SaaS companies like Splunk, Fastly, and GitLab, to consumer services companies like Evite and Ebates, to fintech companies WePay, Bill.com, and PayNearMe. He's also served as a tech curator for the TED conference in Vancouver and is a co-creator and host of TEDx Stanford. He's a past recipient of Deloitte's Venture Capitalist of the Year Award and has also been honored by Forbes magazine as a member of its Midas list of top venture capitalists. He's also the longtime co-creator and executive producer of the Lobby Conference, which they've just recently spun out the investment firm Lobby VC from.
True.
He also teaches entrepreneurship, venture capital, at Stanford Business School and the Harvard Law School. Please welcome, zooming in from a stone's throw away in Palo Alto, where he currently resides with his wife, kids, and dog Teddy, David Hornik.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome to the show, David.
Yeah, what are we drinking today?
I have a delicious Spindrift. I am I was a psychotic Coca-Cola, Diet Coke fanatic for many, many years. Of this very special Hornik Diet Coke.
Wow!
But I was forced to quit cold turkey, and now I'm stuck with the glories of Spindrift. So,
well, I am joining you with said deliciousness Coca-Cola over here. Bree, what have you got?
Ginger beer.
Excellent. And just because we aren't drinking alcohol today on the show does not mean that we're not going to get a little bit wild and crazy. Bree, I think you have a question for David.
Yeah, David. So you have a strange talent, Tuvan throat singing. How in the world did you get into that?
We're going to dive right into Tuvan throat singing. Well, so have either of you ever heard Tuvan throat singing?
I absolutely have now.
Really cool. You had to look it up, didn't you?
I did.
So
I went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, Tuva's this little nation in outer Mongolia, and unlike our singing, which has a single tone, happy birthday to you, it's single tone. The Tuvans actually can create multiple tones at the same time. So they're basically singing more than one note at the same time. And it's incredibly cool. I discovered it while I was studying computer music at Stanford. Some professor had a recording, and he said, listen to this. And it sounded like a flute. It was so like, and I said, oh, wow, that's kind of a creepy flute-like sound. And he said, it's actually a human singing. And I said, well, that's not possible. He said, yeah, it's a human singing both parts. And so it turns out that Professor Feynman was the first person to bring back a recording of Tuvan throat singing. And he became obsessed with this sort of multitonal technique, which then led to me being obsessed with it.
Can you demonstrate maybe?
Oh my God. First of all, I'm a terrible Tuvan throat singer, and it will almost assuredly not work, but I will try because I am shameless. So I discovered when I went to see this incredible show, a live performance of Ondar, who's the world's greatest Tuvan throat singer, that I learned how they, one of the things that makes it possible for these Tuvans to be better throat singers, they smoke like crazy, which creates this very raspy thing that's going on, because you have to create a kind of thing going. But anyway, we'll give it a shot. I'll try very quickly, and then we'll call it when it doesn't work. And it's like whistling, you can't tell when you're smiling. All right.
Okay.
I don't know if you could hear that top line but
yeah.
Wow.
That actually sounded great.
Fantastic.
Cheers to that.
First podcast I've Tuvan throat sung on. So.
Cheers to that. Thank you so much for that.
That's awesome.
That is amazing. And it also looks very strenuous on the throat.
Well, I think if you know how to do it, it probably isn't. But since I'm a self-trained Tuvan throat singer, as opposed to all those professionals who've been carefully trained.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there aren't that many Tuvan throat singing aficionados that listen to our podcast, so they have zero things to compare it to, and
missing out. They're missing out.
You're Grammy worthy in terms of what we believe.
Was there anything that they did? Like, was it a spiritual thing for them, or was it just something that they do to entertain?
Literally the system of music in tuba, and so if it's interesting. This same kind of effect, this using your mouth to create this kind of overtony sound. They also play the jaw harp, which is the same kind of effect. It's just the way they think, as I understand it, they think about the musical system in tuba. So no, there's a great like rock bandy Tuvan throat singing song, and it's just I'm sure that when they hear us sing, they're like, "Why? You are so lame. You can sing."
Well, look, now that you've gotten that out of the way, I feel like we need to celebrate with a prize. There's a bag near you labeled S. Can you please open up that bag? Yes.
This one, S. Ooh.
Perfect. Let's see what we got in there.
Oh, my lordy. Infinite Swedish Fish.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Well,
we hear they're your favorite.
Because they're the best. Like, is it even a question?
I agree.
Sugar. Like, what could be better than gelatinous shaped fish sugars?
Excellent. Excellent. Well, now you can sit back and relax. Like the hardest part of the show is over. And you can indulge in some Swedish Fish while we conversate.
Thank you.
You mentioned that at Stanford you actually got your BA in computer music, and for the listeners, he went on to study criminology at Cambridge. You got your JD from Harvard Law School. You were a public defender for a bit, also a corporate litigator before going to a couple of corporate firms. and you got drawn back to Silicon Valley. I heard that you credit Jerry Yang, who, little known fact to everyone, is that he was your Stanford college roommate, I believe.
He was not my roommate. Jerry,
Okay.
Jerry and I lived in the same freshman dorm.
Okay,
It's this
dorm
crazy
mate.
great
There
dorm
you
at
go.
Stanford called Branner Hall.
Branner
And,
Hall.
I was a freshman in Branner,
Okay.
and my law school roommate lived in this same dorm. He lived across the hall from me, and an amazing guy named Steve Boom, who runs Amazon Music now. Jerry was a friend of ours who lived in the dorm, and we sort of hung out as a group, and he went on to grad school afterwards. I was busy in law school with this buddy of ours, Steve, and another guy named Tim Brady, who was part of the same group of friends. And while we were in law school and business school, Jerry started Yahoo. He calls up Tim and says, "Hey, Tim, I've got this idea. Do you want to come help me write a business plan?" Tim finishes up business school from California and becomes the number 3 person at Yahoo, right, and becomes the COO.
Yeah.
Steve and I finish up with law school, and we go off to various law firms and clerking for judges, et cetera.
Yeah.
But eventually it was sort of like, gee, I was in New York as a litigator, and my wife came home one day and was sort of like, "You need to get a new job." She said, "You know, this job where you argue all day and then you bring home the job is not a good thing. You need you need a new job." And I started chatting with some friends, and Jerry had started Yahoo and it was getting interesting, and the internet was emerging. And so I joined a law firm out in Silicon Valley to start representing startups that represented Yahoo and represented Jerry. And that was really the beginning, where I didn't really know how amazing startups were. I just knew that he was building this cool thing. The internet was interesting, and it was time to move on to something new. And so I ended up representing startups.
Wow. Wow. What was Jerry Yang like in college? And if you have any safe stories that you can tell us right now, we'd love to hear them. We're all ears.
No, Jerry is exactly the same person he was. In fact, I was just joking with some of these friends of ours from our freshman dorm, because we now met 35 years ago when we first came to Stanford, right? And when I look at who we have all become, we're just the same. We're the same. Jerry's the same lovely guy that he was when he got there. He was just smarter than pretty much everybody, but just humble and thoughtful and lovely. And now he's built this incredible company, and he's a very wealthy individual, but he's giving back to the community. He's giving back to Stanford. He's just as lovely as he was then. So I don't have any incriminating stories about Jerry. He wasn't an incriminating story guy. You know, he was just who you think he is.
I was actually just having lunch with some very close friends of mine from middle school, and we were talking about how long we've been friends for. Do you find like your closest friends and confidants come from Stanford, from Harvard days? Are they even further back to when you're in Hollis High School in New Hampshire? Like,
oh my God,
what was that like?
Hollis area high school.
Yeah.
You know what? Venture capital is a job where basically you do nothing. You just know a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And being a VC is about knowing amazing people and trying to help them be successful. And so, you know, one of the nice things is it's a great job for me because I love people. I'm just a people person. I like getting to know people and staying close to them. So I have great friends from every aspect of my life, right? I mean, I'm still in touch with my core group of friends from from high school and growing up. One of them is a salesperson at one of my portfolio companies. Oh. Another one is a senior lawyer at Peloton. Like these are, and then in college, one of my great friends in college was the guy who played drums in pit orchestras when I was playing bass. So the two of us played music together. He went off to Microsoft as a guy named Joe Belfiore, and he's now the vice president of platforms, and he's been there since we graduated 31 years ago. Yep. And to this day, Joe and I catch up and have an amazing time. And so I could say the same of every aspect, every place I worked, every place, I've just stayed in touch with amazing people. And So it's kind of a gift that's I can pretend that's my profession, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Was meeting Selena Tabakawala, who for listeners is the co-founder of Evite, was meeting Selena the aha moment that you had that made you want to jump into venture capital and be an investor full time?
So Selena's amazing. Like, she's just one of my, you know, favorite all-time people.
Yeah.
I told you that I met Jerry in this dormant called Branner Hall, which is the biggest all-freshman dorm at Stanford. Selena was a Brannerite as well. She met her co-founder of Evite in Branner when they were freshmen, I think probably 10 years later than I.
Wow.
Evite was certainly part of it. It goes a little further back. Like, the very first company that I represented as a corporate attorney when I got to Silicon Valley was a company called When.com, W-H-E-N.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 4 founders of When.com, and they're all wonderful people. I'm in touch with all of them to this day. That's now 20 some odd years later. James Joaquin, who's now a partner with Ev Williams in Obvious Ventures, was the the VP of business development in this company that we had just incorporated. And my first big meeting as a lawyer in Silicon Valley was to spend time with James and the partner for whom I worked, talking about business development strategy for this company, When. James was, I don't know, probably about my same age. We were in our 20s, early 30s. And we started talking about his company, and it was just amazing. I was like, wait a second, this is my job. I get to sit with this really smart guy who I really like and talk about how to make his company successful. And so I was his lawyer. When.com did great. We ended up selling it to AOL. I was the lawyer who got to do the M&A deal to sell it to AOL. And then different people went to different places after that. And one of the business development people who worked for James went to Evite. He started working at Evite, and he said to the vice president at Evite, we need to hire David. And the guy's like, well, why do we need to hire David? He's just hire him, you'll see. Now, the reason he needed to hire me is because I didn't sleep. I just was like tirelessly working. And so I drafted some contracts for them, and they liked me. And then I started giving some advice to the then CEO of Evite, a guy named Josh Silverman, who now is the CEO of Etsy. This was his first gig right out of business school. He started running Evite, now runs Etsy. And I got to know Selena and Al, the founders, and I just loved them. I loved everything they were doing. And I was at board meetings, and I was a loudmouth. I was sort of pontificating on what I thought they should think and what they should do. And in other instances, that exact activity got me fired. But in this case, Selena became a lifelong friend. Al became a lifelong friend. Josh Silverman is a great friend. And I got to know the investors in Evite that included August Capital. And that's how I kind of snuck my way into the venture.
Well, so you went through somewhat of a lengthy courting. I remember listening to a podcast. You're talking about like a lengthy courting period with August Capital. Yeah. When they finally say, David, we want you to join you, it's 2000. And they say, look, if you strike out, you can always go back to law. Were you ever, you were obviously this over-caffeinated lawyer, never sleeping, overworking. Were you ever freaked out? Were you nervous, scared about transitioning into being a venture capitalist? And then was there ever a point where you're like, man, maybe I'm just not good at this?
Well, first of all, I think I was too naive and stupid to know that I was giving up a profession that I knew I could do well for a profession that had a very reasonable chance of being terrible at, right? Yeah. So, but I was like, oh, this is great. Venture looks amazing. And how hard could it be, And yeah, I mean, I had a very specific moment where I'd been a VC for like 5 years at this point, and I came home and I have four kids. They were all little. They put them all to sleep. I'm getting in bed with my wife. She's reading a book, and I say to her, hey, Pamela, I had this realization today. And she kind of looked at me like, you know what, that's nothing good follows. I had a realization today. I said, it struck me that 5 years into being a venture capitalist, it's not obvious that I'm good venture capitalist, right? I said, but what is clear to me is that I'm no longer qualified to be an attorney. And,
There you
my
go.
wife looked at me and she said, shouldn't you have thought about that? And I said, yeah, probably should have thought about that. And she said, it's not my problem. And went back to her book. She's like, look at, and her view was like, so be a good venture capitalist. Like, that's how it is. Like, if the problem is that you can't be the thing you used to be, then you better be the thing you are now. And
Right.
so I was,
Yeah.
okay, fine.
Yeah. What was your biggest find? Your earliest big find at August?
From a company standpoint?
Yeah, from a company standpoint.
Look, the bad news is I found all sorts of great businesses that I said no to.
Yeah.
But the really lucky moment was when I met these three founders, a guy named Michael Baum, and his co-founders, Eric Swan and Rob Doss. And at the time they were working on this enterprisey thing. I got introduced to him by a lawyer friend. And the lawyer friend said, you have to meet these founders. He said, I really don't know I don't understand what they're working on, but you'll like them as people. I said, great. They had a company called Applicity. And I said, okay. And I met with them and I heard them out. I did like them. I thought they were great. They were working on this problem. I spent some time with them and I said, it's not clear to me that that's a big problem. And how do you think about it? Anyway, over the course of multiple meetings, they kind of honed this idea. Somewhere in there, they changed the name of the company to Transaction Engines. So now I'm meeting with Transaction Engines. And eventually they said, hey, listen, what we're building, we have an idea and we're going to build a search engine for log files. And I said, well, why would that be useful? And I said, oh, well, here are all the reasons why it might be useful. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. So I got them in front of my partners. We spent time with them. Everybody kind of liked them, liked the idea. And, early deals, you really are worried all the time. Like, is this a good idea? And is it interesting? So I took a lot of time. And finally, the founding CEO, Michael Baum, was like, what's the plan? Are you going to fund it or not? And I kind of said, fine, and went back to my partners and proposed we give the company a term sheet. And the very first board meeting that we had after having funded the company with this really wonderful VC named Nick Sturiali, and I co-funded the company, and Nick and I came for the first board meeting and they said, yeah, we've decided we're going to change the name of the company. It's not going to be Transaction Engines. It's going to be Splunk. And we were like, Splunk, like, what is that? And they explained was, it's like spelunking your log files and all this stuff. And I was a consumer guy. I'd done consumer investments and enterprise investments. I was like, great.
Yep.
Splunk sounds fun. and Nick, who is an enterprise investor, was like, Splunk? What CIO buys Splunk? But anyway, they changed the name. It was an amazing ride. I sat on that board for 13 years over the course, from 3 employees to 3,000, and from $0 in revenue to $1 billion in revenue. Took it public. Let's see what it's trading at today. Today, it is trading at $25.06 billion. Like, there
you go.
Kind of amazing, right?
Yeah.
So that was amazing.
So, I mean, look, obviously 21 years later, things have worked out. And I was listening, credit a lot of success, and not just for yourself, but generally to magic, right? And I feel like magic is this combination of artistry and serendipity, right? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about serendipity, because Lobby VC and how it came about. You've got Jim Everingham, you've got Howard Hardenbaum, you've got Eric Carlberg, Selena, we talked about Candace, Buddy Anheim. You've got a lot of really amazing, talented people that it's often hard to just get a meeting scheduled with together. How do you bring everyone together to form Lobby VC?
Yeah, I mean, it was lucky. I mean, first of all, that group of people, we have collectively known each other for a lot of years. And if you look at, Buddy and I worked together 23 years ago. Selena and I was Selena's lawyer 21 years ago. Jim, I tried to fund his first company 18 years ago. Eric and Howard and I have worked together for 15 years. Candace, we funded her company a decade ago. These are people we've known for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I'd been investing at August Capital for 20 years, and when I got to August, we were investing Lobby 3. So, venture funds are numbered. So I missed, I missed August Capital 1 and I missed August Capital 2. I got there for August 3. And I helped invest August 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when we finished investing August 7, which was a $450 million fund, and the natural thing to do is go raise August 8.
Right.
August. But I sort of sat down, with my partners and said, hey, listen, we have this thing, the Lobby Conference. It's been this great success. The universe has changed. Like, let's do something new. Let's bring some new people in. Let's have a fresh name. Let's associate this, the firm with the conference that's been so fun and engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody said, yeah, let's do that. And so we started talking with just people who we knew to be lovely humans, who the reason that people tell them about the businesses they're working on is because they're helpful, right? Because if you're looking for help, you go to Candace, you go to Selena, you go to Jim, right? And so to bring together this group of people under one roof and be able to have partner meetings with them, every week is just an incredible joy. It's been so nice to have this group come together.
Yeah. I actually have goosebumps kind of listening to this story, because I think it's my ultimate dream to always just have all of my really smart friends come together and do one thing together. Yeah. And I get to live part of it right now, because one of my friends from high school and I started GreenCow Venture Capital together. So we've known each other for so long now. But there's a lot, it's not easy necessarily to work with your friends.
No.
What have you found is the hardest thing while you're building Lobby VC with these friends? Even though you've worked together in some capacity, you've done different things, what's the hardest thing about building this new brand and new firm?
I mean, partnerships are hard, but the starting part is not hard. Once you come together and say, hey, let's build this firm and let's do this. I mean, we had to go raise a fund. And so we had to go tell people like, hey, this is the new group and it's a new name and you should give us money. And they, okay, fine. So that's a process. And so we had to tell the story of how we'd all come together and why we were going to be great partners and why we were going to see great deals. So far, it really hasn't been that hard so far. And in part, I think because we all understand, like, look at, sometimes some deals are good deals and everybody gets excited about it. Sometimes not. We're not looking for unanimity. We're just looking for people to agree that we're making good choices, right? Mm-hmm. And if people do the work, if you respect each other and they do the work, then when they propose something, you say, great, I understand why you do that. Now, in venture, you don't always agree. So say, well, here's why I think that's challenging or whatever. Like I just had a deal that I was very interested in. I got the entire group excited about. We ultimately had coalesced around like, okay, we understand there are these risks, but we're supportive of an investment. It was coming up on the Monday partner meeting, and I had a conversation with a really, really smart entrepreneur friend of mine who was going to go on the board. And he said, but here's the risk. And we had this conversation that went on for, better part of an hour. And at the end of that conversation, I said, yeah, we shouldn't fund the company, and I went back and I talked to my partners and I said, here's what the conversation we had or whatever. And everybody said, yeah, great. Right. I get that. That makes sense. Yeah. If you go through a thoughtful process and you incorporate and engage everybody's opinions, it's pretty good. Now I'm sure we'll have challenges, but right now we're in the honeymoon.
Yeah. You are known obviously as like a people person, right? And very community first and people first investor. And you're not just one of those investors that play lip service to that mentality. I know that for a fact. Can you talk a little bit, and we rarely do this, but I did want to get people a glimpse of sort of what does it mean to be a part of a community in Lobby VC?
To be a part of the community.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it at its heart. I was extremely fortunate that I wrote this little article for Wired UK. Everything is happenstance, right? It turns out that everything is like, oh, there was just a moment. So I went with this group of people to England on a thing called Silicon Valley Comes to the UK. And it was started by Reid Hoffman, a group of people, and because I had gone to Cambridge University, they got me involved, and we were speaking at Cambridge and teaching entrepreneurship was really fun. I met the editor of Wired in the UK. And he said, oh, David, we were talking, and he said, you should write a column for me. And I said, sure, anytime. And then as I was going to the airplane, I got a text that said, someone backed out. If you have something you want to write about, what would it be? And I said, oh, here's what I'm going to write about. And he said, great, when can you have it for me? And I said, well, I have a 12-hour flight. I'll get it to you when I land. He's like, great. And I had just read this infuriating study by Harvard and Stanford Business School that was talking about how mean executives were able to accomplish more. Like, oh, if you're a mean person, you accomplish a lot. And they had this experiment that demonstrated it. And so my article that I wrote was entitled Nice Guys Finish First Eventually. And it was basically like, yeah, if you're doing some stupid little exercise or you're trying to optimize for the moment, you can be as mean or as big a liar as you want. But the venture business, entrepreneurship, and business in general is a long-term business. Yep. And if you want to be successful, then you should not. You should be a good guy, a good gal, a person who pays it forward, because in the end, that will be the more successful strategy. So I wrote this little thing. I get this call from this professor. He says, I'm writing a book and I'd love to talk to you. I said, great. I had this 2-hour-long conversation about my experience. And one of the stories I told him was this, classic story where I did all the right things. I was such a nice guy. And then I got screwed over. But of course there's redemption in the end. And it turns out the CEO changes his mind and brings me into the deal and everything's great. And so that professor ended up writing that story as the opening story of his business book called Give and Take, which became this best-selling business book by this guy, Adam Grant. And so, which was a gift and a curse. It was amazing to be represented as someone who was ultimately successful for being a giver, for being someone who paid it forward. Yeah. On the other hand, it means that lots of people ask you for things. It proves they haven't read the book, because they're missing the entire point. Yeah. They should be giving things, not asking for things. But in any event, so back to your question. This is a very long warm up to the question, which is, to me, there are people on this planet who believe that the way to be successful in business, that life is transactional. I will trade you a thing, right? Like, oh, here's the deal. You give me a bunch of Swedish fish and I'll be on your podcast.
Which is not what we did, by the way.
Just not at all. Right. That is not at all what happened. In the alternative, there are people who think that life is about relationships, that it's about building relationships with great people, and that's the way to be helpful and to help people be successful. And those are the people in my community. Yeah. I am surrounded by people who ultimately say, yes, I will help you, not just because I'm not to be selfish, to be helpful to the broader community, because we know that it will all come back around. And so the best way to not be part of my community is to do the opposite of that. Yeah. And the best way to be part of that community is to truly embody that view of the world.
So I'm going to switch up gears into that, and we're going to veer off subject a little bit, right? But we stumble into the Twitterverse every once in a while. And in one tweet that you just recently had, says it's hard to pinpoint a time when being a giver was the cause of some misstep. I have not always been successful. I've passed on amazing businesses, occasionally lost out on wonderful opportunities, but I don't know that I would have said yes or won by being more of a taker. Completely agree with that. And that's obviously a reference to this book, Give and Take by Adam Grant. Question, is there an opportunity that you've passed on that has gone on to be wildly successful where you wish you had just actually been even more of a giver?
I mean, I don't look at, there are all sorts of wonderful businesses that, you know, that I've passed on that I should not have. And in some ways, it's not that it's about being a giver, right? Like as a VC, you're always trying to assess, is this a big market? Is it a big opportunity? How do you think about it, et cetera? And in retrospect, there are just some people who I should have worked with, right? Where I should have just been excited to work with and should have said yes. And, Reid Hoffman's a perfect example of that. Reid's been a friend forever. And Reid and I had been on a board together, and I had the opportunity to invest in LinkedIn. And in the end, I thought, oh, it's a very expensive price, et cetera, et cetera. When in reality, I should have said, you know what, I'm a Reid Hoffman fan. I'm excited about what he's building, and let's go build a big business together. Patreon. I mean, we ultimately didn't fund Patreon because we weren't sure how big it could get. And yet I just loved the Patreon founders. They're just amazing, right? And so I just think, and I could do this over and over again. Like, they're just a bunch of companies where we loved the people, but we came to reasons that led us to not. The founders of Datadog and like boring, enterprise stuff, loved the company and managed to mess it up, right? So in the end, I think it is about the people, and you really just have to have faith that great people with whom you want to work are going to go build something exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've told us some really great stories. We want to give back to you with our next gift. So let's have him open up the bag that says I.
Yes.
All right.
And while you're doing that, if you just happen to invite me to your lobby conference in Maui this year, I wouldn't say no. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Okay.
I love Kapalua.
This is a very, what in the world?
This is in line, obviously, with community and bringing people together. And as Bree and I both know, nothing does that more than food. And we hear, again, that through the grapevine that you are big into Indian food.
I am. This is insane.
So he's pulling out of a bag a large assortment of cooking supplies, both spices and ghee, I believe. I think if you look,
cardamom black,
some cardamom. I think if you look in there should be a spice container. Which is pretty traditional. I've got one in my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to put all
I'll
of
tell
your...
you, I sit here zooming in the kids' playroom. I got kicked out of my office. And it now smells so much better in here than thank you so much. It's going to be really fun. Now, who has the recipes that I'm gonna need help?
We have got you covered. We're actually we'll give you quite a few recipes offline here. I happen to be lucky to have two parents that one of whom taught cooking classes out of our kitchen way back when, and then a cousin of mine is actually an accomplished chef. He's a Michelin star chef based in New York and in India. So we're going to hook you up with that as well, with the recipes.
Amazing.
Have you been cooking a lot during the pandemic, or do you eat your Indian food out and get takeout? Is there a favorite Palo Alto spot?
Definitely. Amber India is the local spot, and it's very good. I have been cooking more, and I had all my kids came back from their various sundry places at the outset of this awfulness. So I had my 4 kids back, and they were varying degrees of good cooks. So they were they were uniformly terrible cleaners, but they had varying degrees of success at cooking stuff. And recently I've been actually Good Eggs, which I love Good Eggs, although I have to say it's like all the best stuff for all the money in your pocket. It's like unimaginable.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they have some of these sort of recipes and kits, and they've been great. They're great, great salads and tacos and things.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not a terrible cook. I'm a truly mediocre cook, but I'm now inspired. I've got 100% pure cow ghee.
Yes.
And I have every intention of putting this to excellent use in a recipe.
Use it sparingly. From my experience, use it sparingly. It's fantastic and it adds tons of flavor, but use it sparingly. Did you develop your love for Indian food while you were out in Cambridge?
Oh my God, I totally did.
Okay.
But I developed my love. I grew up in New Hampshire.
Right.
I am fairly certain that there was no Indian restaurant in my town anywhere near me in New Hampshire. We would have an incredibly exotic ethnic Chinese food meal, periodically. Yeah. Christmas, for example. We were like one of 3 Jewish families in New Hampshire. It was me, Sarah Silverman, and Adam Sandler. That was it.
There you go.
Jews in New Hampshire. Oh, and the Helfmans.
You're in good company there.
That was good company. That was good company.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I went to study in England, I actually was on this quest, which shows this is terrible, but I was obsessed with onion bhajis, and I was trying to find the very best onion bhaji in England, and so I had them in dozens of places around Cambridge and London. Of course, they're super greasy and fried, and
but all the goodness, all of the good stuff.
Oh yeah, that was a good start.
When this is all over, Bree, you and I and David are going to go out and either I'm going to have my mom cook us a very traditional meal. I might cook a little bit, but we'll get some onion bhaji as well. So it'll be fantastic. So I'm a big soccer fan. Did you also get into soccer when you were in Cambridge? I feel like it would be impossible not to get into soccer, but
I played on my college's football team, the soccer team.
Yeah.
But they hated me so much. I had 2 very big problems. First of all, I lacked in skill. I made up for with aggression.
There you go.
And I was a little bit of a bull in the China shop. Yeah. So they were just like, oh, bloody American. He's just a catastrophe.
Yeah.
So, but my true love of soccer, it came because my daughter became a soccer fanatic. She was a hardcore soccer player from an early age, and she and I would, it was the thing we did together. She was on a traveling team. We would fly to places where she was playing, and then we had the really good fortune one year when she was pretty little of being in Europe when the Women's World Cup was happening. And so we went to a game, and that was amazing. And then turned out that the US made the finals. And so I was like, I have to go to the finals. My wife was like, no, you don't. Yep, we did. So we went to that. That was amazing. And then this guy, Steve Boom, who I told you about earlier, who was at Amazon Music, who was my law school roommate and lived across the hall from me in my freshman dorm. Steve and his family and my daughter Darrow and I went to the finals of the Women's World Cup in Canada together, and that was amazing. I'm absolutely devastated that I missed the Women's World Cup in France, but it's coming up next in Australia. And I was just at a soccer game with Selena Tabakawala and her kids, because the Stanford women's soccer team plays an inch from here. Yeah. And so we went to the soccer game, and Selena and her daughter went to the France Women's World Cup. So we're all going to go to the Australia World Cup. It's gonna be
very cool.
That's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm jealous, very, very jealous. So going from the beautiful game of soccer to the second part of magic, right, which is artistry, right? You're a music geek, but also you are quite the art fan. You and your wife both. I believe, Bree, am I wrong? But Pamela is, you were telling me.
Yeah, she works at the Cantor Stanford Museum, correct?
Yeah, exactly. She's
That's right.
volunteered. It's funny because Pamela has volunteered. She sits at the front desk. You know, when you walk in and they're like volunteers and you're usually, 80-year-old ladies. Well, when my kids all were in school, she said, great, I can have some time to myself. And she volunteered at the museum. So she would sit at the desk at the museum and see who came through, get to know the people who came through. And we started donating to the museum. We donated some art and we loaned art that we had, and she was involved. And so she ended up going on the board of the museum. And they would laugh because she's the only person who ever sat at the front desk. Still, I mean, they've been closed for a couple of years, but she's excited for them to open back up so she can be back at the desk and and seeing kids coming through and young adults. And no, it's been a big part of her life and our life. Yeah.
How do you think, and Bree and I actually have seen this trend across all of our previous episodes. There's this love of music. There's a love of history. Art and music is a pervading theme amongst a lot of these very successful peers and venture capitalists that we've had on. What do you think it is about that? What's the mesh there?
I mean, it is, I'm sure there's something to this right brain, left brain thing, right? Ultimately, entrepreneurship does require creativity, right? It requires the capacity to see the world in a slightly different way. It also requires a real intellectual curiosity. And I find, at least, that the beauty of art is that you get to see the world in a different way. You get to approach the world. You get to see it through the eyes of an artist. You get to see something about the world that you may not otherwise have thought about or seen. And same thing with music too, right? Music reflects different cultures and different perspectives. And so for me, Pamela and I approach art emotionally. Like we see a piece of art. If it captures our attention for whatever reason, we dig in and say, oh, this is an amazing artist. Let's learn more about them. We've found that we are particularly, drawn to women artists of color, people who are reflecting the world in a way that we would like the world to be reflected. Doesn't mean that, white male artists aren't creating great art. We have art by white male artists, but there's something about perspective and opportunity and all of that we've really loved. And I'm sitting here. Actually, this piece behind me was by a Czechoslovakian white male artist, a young artist who Wojtek, who's doing interesting stuff. But as I look over here to my right, there is this incredible print done by a guy named McClooney, who used to teach at MIT, and it's of Thurgood Marshall. And this, I first saw this image in the Harvard Law Library. It was on the wall of the Harvard Law Library, and I would walk by it every day on my way to my office when I was teaching. I just became enthralled with it, and I just couldn't get it out of my mind. I had to track down McClooney and find out if there was another one available, because it was a print. There could be more available. I'm gonna.
Oh, absolutely. We get a tour. Everyone joining us on YouTube.
I tracked him down, and here it.
Oh, cool.
Piece, and it's this beautiful image. Thurgood Marshall is a hero. He's this. You mentioned that I had been a public defender. It's a little bit of a misstatement. I was sort of a public defender. I took the public defense course while I was in law school, and then the next semester you go and represent clients in court. And so I did have the fortune to represent a dozen or so folks in court. But Thurgood Marshall is the very epitome of what's important about the courts and the court system. And so to have this beautiful piece of art that's so evocative and shows him as this, as this incredible towering figure that he is, and then to have it sit on your wall, like, that's amazing. Yeah. And if every piece of art you encounter can be that to you in some context, then you're going to kind of live a pretty full life. So that's how we think about art, at least.
Bring a lot of, whether you were, clerking, I don't know if that's the right word, whatever it might be, but as a public defender, you have to have a pretty high level of empathy for the people that you're counseling, right, and defending.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about the different perspective that you have to have. You find that those are the things that you apply the most to the entrepreneurs that you evaluate and then invest in?
I joke that the very best thing you could be as a venture capitalist is a psychiatrist or a psychologist, right? Like, the human mind is what's going to ultimately create success or failure here, and human interactions and the capacity to build teams and the ability to be persuasive. And so I do think empathy is a hugely valuable when you're trying to assess people, trying to get to know them, trying to get them to be truthful, right? I mean, I had the misfortune of once funding an individual who I think is probably a sociopath. And the problem with sociopaths is that it's hard to know what they actually think, right?
Yeah.
But on average, when you spend time with people, you get to really know them, and you get to understand what's motivating them and why they're excited about what they're building. And those things are important. They're important to get started, but they're really important in year 7, or they're really important.
Yeah. Or
so
during a pandemic, by the way.
What's that?
Or during a pandemic as well.
Or during a pandemic, or when things have just gone terribly, or when things, it's hard.
Yeah. That's one thing that just in working with a lot of our portfolio company founders, we found that number one, we had a very captive audience because no one was going anywhere. But number two, people really needed just company, right? Needed to bounce ideas off of other folks. And I think if you're a founder that is out there alone, or even if you have a couple of co-founders, it's very hard to feel vulnerable. It's very hard to ask questions because you're still trying to sit there and act like the leader and have the answers to everything. And one of the things that we found, at least, was, hey, give founders the opportunity to talk to other founders and to just bring people together, because more than mentorship and more than, it's exactly right. It's like founder therapy, right? Bringing people together in that sense is maybe the most profound thing that we can do as investors generally to add value, right? I don't know if there's much better than that.
I just had dinner. So I funded this wonderful guy named Rajiv Maheswaran. He had started a company called Second Spectrum, which was this really cool business. He and his co-founder were professors at USC, and they were artificial intelligence experts, and they were bringing artificial intelligence to sports data, and funded the company. Loved this team, and had a very close relationship with them. And we recently sold the company to a company called Brilliant. That's a sports data company that just went public. And
congrats.
And so I was in LA with my wife to take Rajiv and his wife to dinner to just celebrate, like, this is amazing. Yeah. And his wife is a therapist. And we were talking about this, and he was talking about the hard times and the loneliness and the challenge. He said that luckily I have this incredibly supportive wife, and she's literally a therapist, and she did all these things. And she said, yeah, and mostly I would say, have you called David? Like, have you called David? He'll probably have a on this. And I thought that was such a, it was such a nice, of course, that wasn't the case. Like, most of the time she helped him and they had these great conversations. She is now working with women founders. That's her practice. And so, that's an amazing thing, right? For her to be helping these women founders. But I thought it was such a gift to say it, because it was just like you want to be the VC who a founder wants to call when it's hard, right? You don't just want to be the VC who gets the call when things work great. Like, everybody gets the call when it works great, but who gets the call when you have a real problem, or you had something go wrong, or you want to work through something tough? And I hope that in the end I can be that VC.
Sure.
Like that's the relationship I want.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, that's really cool. I actually worked with Second Spectrum. I'm here in LA. I worked with them when I was at TriNet. They were one of my clients.
Awesome.
Great team.
Yeah. So just such smart, I mean, unimaginably smart and simultaneously lovely humans. It was really fun. And I'm not a sports person. Like I love soccer. And finally they did get to European football and that was great. But as a general matter, it's like, it's not really the thing that motivates me. And in the venture community, it's full of people who are like, all I care about is sports. And I remember his wife said, why did you fund this company? You don't care about sports. And my answer was, because I love your husband. And she was like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, we know you've been a longtime supporter of the arts, to go back to our previous topic. And now that things are finally starting to open back up, at least partially for the time being, we wanted to get something that you and Pamela could enjoy. So Vic is a member of the SF MoMA. And so we got you an annual membership to the SF MoMA.
Oh, that is an awesome gift. You know, when Pamela and I got engaged, I was in law school. Pamela was sort of in Cambridge waiting for me to finish up. So she was teaching at the Harvard Law Child Care Center. And so the parents of these kids who she was taking care of during the day had an engagement shower for us. Yep. And the very best gift we got today, to this date, the very best gift we got was a Met membership, because we were moving to New York next. So now
that's awesome.
Fantastic.
So thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome place.
And I hear actually that they have an exhibit now that's not, it's a temporary exhibit that's happening on the weekends. And I believe it's street art and murals. So definitely something that you're going to want to check out.
Yeah, they're doing temporary art each weekend. I just saw, my wife has this Instagram that posts art. And so she just posted a piece from that exhibition.
Now you're into street art, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Love street art.
What kind of street art have you guys bought? Which artists?
Shepard Fairey is probably the street artist who we are most closely associated with. Shepard Fairey is, first of all, is just visually stunning. It's beautiful work. He also has a very clear political point of view, which has been great.
He's the Obey artist?
Yeah, exactly.
Love him. Yeah, he's great.
Yes. I mean, it all started out with Andre the Giant, and anyone who doesn't love Andre the Giant is just heartless. Yeah. Like if you go to Princess Bride and you didn't love Andre the Giant, I have nothing.
I don't want to know you.
Yeah. And so he is Shepard Fairey is Obey. Yeah.
You've been a champion. You and your wife both have been champions for a lot of different rights. You bring up the politics, etc. Many of our listeners and viewers might not know that you're also on the vice chair of GLAAD, which, for everyone who doesn't know, it's a leading LGBTQ rights organization. Can you tell us a little bit about how and why you got involved with GLAAD?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just timed off of the GLAAD board. You're allowed to have, it's a 2-year term, and you're allowed to have 3 2-year terms, and I just finished my 7th year.
Oh.
So there's a special rule that says, if in your 6th year you happen to be on the executive committee, then we'll let you stay an extra year. And I was the vice chair of governance at the time, and so I got to sneak in as a 7th year. You know what happened was, now 7-8 years ago, I was sitting down with my wife, and we were talking about life in general, and I had been deeply involved in all of these for-profit companies. I'd been all these for-profit boards. I had the good fortune of a number of them working, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I had not done enough to give back, and that we probably as a family should do more. And one of the things was that I should go on a not-for-profit board and give in that way. And so we had a conversation about what was our family focused on? What did we want to help to be successful? And ultimately we decided that we wanted to focus on LGBTQ rights. My oldest son is gay. He came out in middle school. We stood with the 4 kids on the corner of the street in California when Proposition 8 was being proposed and then passed, outlawing gay marriage in California. We were devastated. And I started working with local activists and social media activists to try and counter that. And GLAAD is just an astonishing organization. It uses the media and representation to try and move forward the and the opportunity for LGBTQ individuals in this country and beyond. Yeah. And so I offered myself up to them, and they were like, "Who are you?" Like, what, said, "Hi, I'm here. I'd like to be on your board." And they were like, "Who are you?" It doesn't really work. But I had a lot of conversations with them where I told them why I thought it was important and how I thought I could be helpful. And thankfully they did put me on the board. And it was an amazing 7 years of watching the Supreme Court enshrine gay marriage in the Constitution, and watching a bunch of great things happen, and then watching a lot of pressure on the gay community with the Trump administration. And so, no, I'm grateful that I had the opportunity. And it turns out that GLAAD, you have to time off for at least a year. So we'll see about 2022.
There you go. There you go. Well, I was listening to a podcast that you did in 2016. By the way, I forgot to mention, you are the original podcaster in the venture capital community. We're just kind of carrying the torch from what you started.
I did the very first podcast. It was VentureCast.
Yeah.
And I had this like little digital recorder, and then I would just, as I was driving to board meetings, I'd hey, and it was so bad. It was so noisy and so. You have upped the game. I'm sitting here with mustard seeds and ghee, and you have actually, you've upped the game dramatically.
Well, by the way, I was looking for VentureCast on Spotify. It turns out that it's a gaming podcast now. So someone's commandeered the name.
It should be on. You can get it on iTunes. We still did it periodically. My partner Howard and I ultimately would just chat about technology for an hour and then throw it up there. Yeah. But I don't know when the last one we did is. It's been a while.
Well, in 2016, and not on that podcast, you very rightly predicted the boom of seed financing from institutionals, not just coming from angels and high net worth individuals, et cetera. And so as Nostradamus of the venture community, I guess, and in line with the LGBTQ community, I'm really interested to get your perspective on what the next 5 to 10 years look like in terms of representation from the LGBT community in venture, both as partners, et cetera, and in founders and as founders.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm definitely Nostradamus. I say, what's the very best thing you could be to be a venture capitalist? And the answer is omniscient. That would be very helpful. I sadly am not, but I'm good. I occasionally have the good fortune of working with some smart people. There is no question, though, that there are immense pressures on the venture industry to be more diversified, and which is a great thing. I think it's a great thing, and it's forcing. And it's coming from the very top. So the investors in venture capital are called limited partners, and they are universities and fund of funds and family offices. And there's a huge focus now on funding great, venture capitalists of color, venture capitalists from the LGBTQ community, women venture capitalists, et cetera. And so, which is great. And I actually think it's opening the door to a lot more diversity in the venture business. So 10 years from now, I think that you'll see a much broader spectrum of investors coming from greater breadth of backgrounds, and who will have had, the studies show that the greater the diversity of your team, the more success you have. And so, but it takes such a long time. Yeah. But 10 years from now, as these great emerging teams, right? do really well, I think that we'll start seeing this, right? I think we'll start seeing that the results have followed the diversity, and then that will be the end of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to get back to the book Give and Take by Adam Grant. We're VCs, and literally our jobs is providing capital for an entrepreneur. We're givers, right? By the nature of our business. And it should be so easy to label us as givers, yet I'm pretty sure that if you go out and you poll the majority of people out there, we've got a taker stigma. What do you and I and Bree, as someone who's in the community, what do we do to change that mindset of people, and how do we get more people to be givers in the venture capital space?
Well, I mean, some of it is just structural, right? At the end of the day, my goal when I fund your company is to buy a chunk of your company. So I may be giving you money, but you're giving me a big percentage of your business. And so I always say to entrepreneurs who push back and say, oh, venture is a ripoff, or, oh, you folks are not looking out for the best interests of entrepreneurs, whatever. Is that, look, in the end, what I am is someone who has capital to help accelerate your business. And then I'm going to give you my personal capital to try and be a multiplier on that economic capital. Yeah. If you don't think when I give you $10 million for 20% of your business, it won't accelerate your business by more than the 20% I bought, don't take the money. Like, that's a terrible idea, right? Yeah. But if you think like, oh, I have this great business, and if only I had $10 million, I could really grow it faster, then that's what venture capital is for. Like, here, take my $10 million and let's go build a big business together, right? So, but I think that the problem is that if you think about it as this an us versus them paradigm, then you're missing the most successful businesses, which are ultimately, we come together, my capital, and it's not even mine, I borrow it.
Right.
It's like, someone else's capital that I borrow and I hand to you, and we work together to try and build some big and interesting business that makes some part of the planet better. Mm-hmm. And if it's successful, then the company's worth a lot of money and we all do well. Like, that is not a me and us versus them thing. It is a collaborative process where everybody succeeds. And I find it mystifying when venture investors don't understand that. And they're, oh, I need more. It's like, no, you need the entrepreneurs to care. They need to be successful in order for them to do the work that results in you doing well. Like, it's a collaborative effort,
Yeah. If you are looking at sort of the later stage game, the folks that invest in our companies, right? The A, the B, the C, et cetera. And you see tremendous amounts of capital from LPs flowing into these large growth stage current firms. And it seems like every other day you hear about a Tiger Global, sort of king making the next unicorn in India or, wherever it might be. What do you think the long-term impact is on sort of the venture ecosystem with that model?
Well, the model only works as long as we have this incredibly robust public market, right? We've had this crazy, bull market for over a decade, and it's really powered so much of this growth and so many of these dollars. It's just a crazy idea that companies now go public at $10 billion, right? When I started in the venture industry, if you had $1 billion company, you had done so well. Like, that's an astonishing event. There was no such thing as $100 billion company. Right. Companies weren't 10 and $20 billion companies. And yet now here we are with these companies that are worth a fortune, right? It's just unimaginable. And so, as long as that continues, then it's great. We have this hugely robust set of seed investors who are raising capital that they're then seeding the market with. And you have this huge amount of dollars coming into late stage businesses, because by the time they're public, so much of the value has already been made, right? These investors, these public company investors, were used to investing at $1 billion and watching it go up to 10. When it starts at 10, they've lost so much of that beta and that opportunity. So they're now moving down to say, like, I need to get in earlier and earlier.
Sure.
It's great for entrepreneurs, right? It's lots of capital. It's not terribly dilutive. It's really powering these businesses. So I think that's great. I just fear that when the market corrects, when there is a moment in time when the market says, whoa, 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 this is, maybe we don't grow this quickly or whatever, that there'll be a change and everything will contract. And, but until then, it's great for entrepreneurs.
Yeah. What's your thought on SPACs, right? There's obviously been a boom of SPACs in the last couple of years, and they've been around for a lot longer. And I hope our listeners, we've talked about SPACs a few times in episodes, I hope they realize that they've been around for a long time. This is not a new concept, but there has been a boom in the number of SPACs. What are your feelings on them? I know people are divided.
Look, having the capacity to get to great outcomes for companies is a good thing. And so if SPACs can help some companies get public in an efficient way, or bring great leadership to companies that otherwise could use some additional leadership, that's all great. I don't understand why there was this proliferation of SPACs. Like there was there wasn't suddenly a gigantic need for SPACs. The majority of my companies that will be public companies will go public through a traditional process. There will be public company buyers. They will raise capital. They will trade on the public markets. And it's this process has worked very well for lots of years, right? Yeah. I mean, I look at, I took this company, Bill.com, public a couple, 3 years ago. It's just having an incredible run. It went public at a couple of $1 billion. That was a great price at the time. It's now trading at $20 billion, more than $20 billion, while they bought companies and operated well and executed well, and the public markets are excited about it, which means there's more capital available. They raised $1 billion in debt. I mean, everything that the public markets are intended for has worked perfectly with Bill.com. And my sense is great companies will continue to use these traditional processes to get public and be successful. The SPAC is a fine alternative in some instances. The direct listing is a fine alternative in some instances. But I continue to believe that the underwritten public offering, the same thing that the venture industry has been relying on for decades, is the best and most rational process for most companies to get to the public markets.
Excellent. Well, I think it is about that time, Bree, that we asked David to play a little game with us. David, would you play a little game with us?
All right. What is it?
Well, this game,
this
game is 5 questions randomly chosen from Chuck Klosterman's 23 questions I ask everybody I meet in order to decide if I can really love them.
All right.
And it's from his book, Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. I still have not read this book.
These are the kinds of questions where you go, that Hornik's boring.
Yeah. Well, look, that's why we only chose 5 of them. And we
can always edit them out.
Yeah, we can edit them out.
I'm ready.
Reed, do you want to ask the first question?
I'll start. Okay. Yeah. So first question, someone's invented the Dream VCR, which allows you to tape an entire evening's worth of your own dreams, which you can then watch at your own leisure. However, when you watch your dreams, you must do so with your family and your closest friends in the same room. They get to watch your dreams along with you. And if you don't agree to this, you can't use the Dream VCR. Would you still do this?
No.
You care to elaborate on that?
No, I do not. I don't
Right.
usually remember my dreams, but as a general matter, I suspect that is a bad plan.
Fair enough. We will accept that. All right. Number 2, let us assume that you meet a magician and he can do 5 simple tricks. He can pull a rabbit out of his hat. He can make a coin disappear. He can turn the ace of spades into the Joker card and a couple of others in the similar vein. But these are the only tricks that he can do. He can't learn any more. However, it turns out that he can actually use magic to do these tricks. He's legitimately magical, but he's very limited in scope and influence. Would you believe that this person is more or less impressive than Albert Einstein?
Oh, dramatically less impressive. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm much more interested in the human intellect as a capacity to, to move the world forward. But that would be cool. I once was at an early TED conference, and one of the attendees was David Blaine. And so during like an intermission, people are sitting around getting drinks, and David Blaine was just sitting there chatting with us and doing this close-up magic. And it was, I mean, it looked, to my mind, he did have that skill. Like it was,
wow,
it was unbelievable. You're just sitting there going, I just can't. How did you manage that?
Yeah.
But Einstein, I'm going with Einstein.
Fair.
That's a fair answer. Okay, next question. You meet a wizard in downtown San Francisco. The wizard tells you he can make you more attractive if you pay him money. When you ask how this process works, the wizard points to a random person on the street. You look at this random stranger. The wizard says, I will now make them $1 more attractive. He waves his magic wand. While nothing is different to the naked eye, you can't deny that this person is vaguely more sexier. This wizard has a weird rule, though. You can only pay him once. You can't keep giving him money until you are satisfied with your looks. You can only give him one lump sum. How much money would you give this wizard?
None. I have to say, not because I think I'm some grandly handsome man. I just think that looks are, I mean, I maybe have to think this because I am a 5'4" little chubby man. So maybe it's like, oh yeah, looks can't possibly be the determinant. but my friend Sam Yagan was the founder of OkCupid, this dating site where both my sister and brother met their spouses.
Wow.
And there's a piece of information that he shared that his team shared that has stuck with me forever, which is they did the math. They just looked at information and said, it turns out that if you choose the very best photo of yourself to put on your profile, you will get more responses. But if you choose the photograph that best reflects you, that is a best reflection of who you actually are, you are more likely to get successful matches, right? It's not about being vaguely more attractive. It's about being attractive to the right person. Why in the world my wife Pamela decided that she was attracted to me, I cannot answer that question. I am deeply grateful, but I have no need to be any more or less attractive than I am because I am who I am. So.
Well, don't tell that to the plastic surgeons of Beverly Hills. You're going to put them out of business.
I know.
Exactly. Wow.
Oh,
yeah,
that's funny.
That puts Laura and I in different perspective, and also Daniel's, way over kicking his coverage here with you, Bree.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, that's some pretty good advice from your buddies over at OkCupid. Data is important when it comes to love, more important than people realize.
There you go.
All right, number 4, you have won a prize. You have 2 options for this prize. You can choose either, but not both. One is a year in Europe with a monthly stipend of $300,000. And the second is a trip with Sir Richard Branson or Elon Musk, or pick your billionaire space explorer on their shuttle. Which do you choose?
Is just the easiest question, total easy question for me. The answer is Europe. I have no interest I don't know why anyone I'm sure it's majestic and amazing, but first of all, I don't have any interest in risking my life so dramatically. Like, I just don't like that. Just seems like a bad idea.
Agreed.
Whereas I love traveling. I would have an unimaginable budget to go find and buy art from the great new emerging artists of Europe. Like, oh my God, can I have that? Like, that would be so great.
Unfortunately, Burkland can't spring for that.
No,
Sorry.
that's not it. I mean, I don't mean to seem ungrateful.
Yeah. I mean, if we pass 100 million views of this podcast or listens, I mean, then we could probably think about, yeah.
Well,
start promoting it right now.
Right
yeah,
now, right now.
yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
No,
That's a lofty goal there.
Lofty goal.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
all right.
Okay, last question. 2 unauthorized movies are made about your life. The first is an independently released documentary, primarily comprised of interviews, such as this podcast, with people who know you and bootleg footage from your actual life. Critics are describing the documentary as brutally honest and relentlessly fair. Meanwhile, Columbia TriStar has produced a big budget biopic of your life, casting major Hollywood stars as you and all your acquaintances. Though the movie is based loosely on actual events, screenwriters have taken a lot of liberties with the facts. Critics are split on the artistic merits of this fictionalized account, but audiences love it. Which film would you be most interested in seeing, and who would you want to play you in the blockbuster?
I would definitely want to see the documentary more than the movie because I'm a documentary person. Like, I love documentaries, obsessed with documentaries. I would want Joseph Gordon-Levitt to play me.
Oh, that's a great pick for you.
Because he's just, I've had the great fortune of getting to know him because he has a startup called Hit Record, which is a really great company. And he's just the loveliest human. Like, I mean, so I don't know if he could play me or, whatever. I certainly don't look like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but it would just be fun to have Joe be me. That would be awesome.
I think he's your celebrity doppelganger. I would definitely think there's some similarity there.
I could see him. Yeah, I could definitely see him with the horn-rimmed glasses. For sure. For sure. Well, look, I certainly know that we love you much more after humoring us with those answers. And with that, would you mind opening up the last bag for our VC unboxing? There we go. It's labeled V. I think if you're a fan of the show, you know what this is. He's digging through a lot of packing paper.
Oh, good.
Beautiful.
All right.
Ooh, yeah.
So yeah, this is a sneaky one. So for our listeners and our viewers, one of David's most unusual hobbies is collecting Alice in Wonderland editions. But those get really pricey. And so we got him a vest instead with the Cheshire Cat smile to remind him of Alice in Wonderland, but also to show everyone basically how remarkably positive he always is. It's been a huge pleasure of ours to have you on the podcast. We're so grateful for the time. As we always do with all of our guests, Bree and I would love to give you the last 20 seconds of the show to bring attention to one thing, to say hi to mom, whatever it might be. This is your 20 seconds to toast us out.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, this has been so fun. All podcasts should be this fun.
Yay.
So thank you for that. So great. We talked about GLAAD and I'm grateful for that. I think it's a powerfully important organization. But I hope that just people who are listening can appreciate this idea that, being someone who helps others be successful and happy is the path to happiness, because it has been for me. I hope it is for others. Mostly, I just consider myself an incredibly lucky human. I've had the good fortune of working with amazing people, doing stuff that I love, including this podcast. So thank you for that.
Cheers.
Cheers to that. Thank you so much.
Great people.
Enjoy this episode of Drinks with a VC? Please be sure to hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts.